and pleased to be joined now for a full wrap-up on the 2023 draft class for the Bills. Senior producer from NFL Films and co-host of ESPN's NFL Matchup Show. It is one Greg Cosell joining us. And Greg, before we get to the draft class, there is breaking news. Tom Pelissero from NFL Network is reporting that the Bills are signing former Seahawks nose tackle Puna Ford to a one-year deal. One of the top free agents still available, Tom Pelissero says. Ford turned down more money elsewhere to try to win a ring in Buffalo. We had Brandon Beane in studio here yesterday, Greg, and he did lament the fact that he was unable to come up with a defensive tackle in the draft. He said the board just did not fall their way. What does this addition do to their ranks, knowing it's essentially the same quartet that was here last year, now with Puna Ford added on top?
Yeah, Puna Ford, Brownie, 2 years ago in Seattle, he had a really outstanding season. And I know the Seahawks thought that he'd be a foundational piece going forward and didn't have quite the same year this past year, which is obviously why he's a free agent. He is short, stocky, built very low to the ground, but has tremendous quickness, really quick feet for that body type. At his best, sort of playing nose shade. I mean, that's the kind of player he is, but he's very, very quick. So he's kind of an interesting guy because his body type does not suggest that kind of movement ability and that kind of foot quickness, but that's really what his game is.
Yeah, he's listed at like 5'11".
310 pounds.
Yeah, 310. So, yeah, he's got to bring something to the table to have been as effective as he was out in Seattle at least 2 years ago.
Yeah, it's the quickness, Steve. He's really, at his best, that's what he is. He's just one of those kind of freakishly built guys because he's so short, but he's really quick.
Yeah, and I got to imagine he wins a lot of leverage battles. 20 tackles for loss over his last 3 seasons with 7 sacks. Kind of a run stuffer by trade, though. But let's move on to the draft class here, Greg. I know you were fond of Dalton Kincaid's tape.
Yeah.
And it's a weapon. I mean, a lot of Bills fans felt that the Bills needed to add like a quote-unquote number 2 passing weapon, and I think a lot of people just naturally assumed that in the draft that would be a receiver, but that idea came and went quickly when 4 receivers went in a row from basically 20 to 22 or 23. So, basically Brandon Beane pivots and goes for the best pass-catching tight end in the draft. Question to you, in time, or maybe sooner rather than later, can this guy develop into the number 2 passing weapon in this offense behind one Stephon Diggs?
I think he can. And, it's interesting you said the word receiver because that's exactly what Dalton Kincaid is. In fact, at the end of my transition, when I did my evaluation of him, I said that he can be used and deployed within the context of an offense much in the same way that Travis Kelce can. Now, obviously, we know he's not Travis Kelce as we speak today, but he's got those kind of athletic traits, those kinds of hands. You can see in these shots how incredibly athletic he is. He's kind of long and lean. He could probably add a few pounds and get a little bigger without losing any of his quickness. He's the hands are what also really stand out. This guy catches everything. So he's a receiver more than he is a pure tight end.
And we've talked a little bit. The intriguing part is how much does he see the field? Certainly, he's not a run-blocking tight end like Dawson Knox is for the Bills. But if you're going to go 12 personnel, certainly he's one of those 2 guys. But, the Bills ran 4% of that last year. Even if they double it, it's less than 10. It's 1 out of 10 snaps. How many snaps does Kincaid get? Certainly, even if you put him out there, he can be a slot receiver, like you said. But that's the intriguing question that people are trying to answer.
Well, they're going a little crazy up there in Buffalo, Steve, because they drafted O'Cyrus Torrence and they just signed Latavius Murray. So who knows? Maybe this is going to be a 12 personnel offense, and they're going to run the ball because O'Cyrus Torrence is a power offensive guard. I mean, his game is built on engagement, physicality, toughness, competitiveness, far more than athleticism and finesse. So I was joking a little bit. Obviously, it's not as if they're, going to take the ball out of Josh Allen's hands, but I don't think he traded. I don't think Brandon Beane traded up to get Dalton Kincaid, especially with some of the reports I've heard, and I've heard Brandon Beane talk about it. So Dalton Kincaid's going to play 10 snaps, Steve. I mean, I'm sure you feel the same way. So Kincaid's a receiver. He can block. That's not his calling card, but he did line up attached to the formation at Utah. He did line up in wing alignment. So he was used as a blocker. So I think you're going to see more 12 personnel, and hey, you might see more run game or more run game looks.
Let me ask you this, because one of our callers brought this up. I thought it was a very astute point concerning O'Cyrus Torrence. If, in fact, he wins the starting job at right guard, which many people have him penciled in there, even though he'll be competing against David Edwards and the incumbent starter Ryan Bates. Let's just say he wins the starting job. How much does he help in terms of integrity of the pocket and things of that nature, knowing in his own division there are players like Quinnen Williams, Christian Wilkins, and Christian Barmore?
Yeah, I mean, obviously you're drafting Torrence because you believe that he can win the job. And, even though his game is built more on physicality and power, does he struggle on occasion? Did the tape show that he struggled on occasion with interior quickness when he could not control pass rushers early in the down with his strong hands? Yes, but he's a guy that he wins in pass protection mostly, Brownie, with his size, his mass, and his strong hands. He's not an unbelievable lateral movement athlete, but he is a strong man, and he's got tremendous arm length. His arm length is almost 34 inches, which is really good for a guard, and he's 6'5", almost 340 pounds. So he is a big man, and his game is built on strong, heavy hands, power. He's a guy that he wants to control and engage early in the down. That's the way he wins in pass protection.
Yeah, no question. He's a big body and is perfect for down inside when you got to move the pile. Guys like him are the guys that can get it done. We've also taken some phone calls today, Greg, about people saying it's quite the shift from going from a physical specimen like Tremaine Edmonds at middle linebacker, a 6'5", 250-pound guy with an enormous wingspan, and he seems to cover up a lot of space. To the last 2 years, the Bills have taken finger quotes modern linebackers. They're both 6'2" and under, 240 and under, maybe 230 and under. Just a smaller size of linebacker who are more athlete than they are run stuffer. What are your thoughts about Dorian Williams for the Bills?
Yeah, I liked his tape a lot. His athletic testing measurables were phenomenal. I mean, yes, he's a little undersized. He was 228 at the combine. He fits the profile, certainly more of that scrape and flow, run and hit backer. He's got great play speed. He's got that inside out, sideline to sideline pursuit range. But he plays physically. I mean, he's got really quick feet. I thought he had really strong key and diagnose play recognition instincts. He had a quick trigger. Even though he doesn't have the mass you'd ideally like, I thought he played with physical toughness, and he has really long arms, and I thought he used them really effectively, in terms of arm extension, which allowed him to take on and shed blocks of climbing O-linemen. So even though he's a smaller guy, I think he plays bigger in some ways, and you guys will remember this guy is still in the league, obviously, but he kind of reminded me of Quan Alexander coming out of LSU. I think it was 2015, and Alexander started right away for the Bucs and put up big tackle numbers. Athletic guy, played a little more physically. I like Dorian Williams a lot, and I think that he would have a chance to start.
Whether it's him or Terrell Bernard or, heck, even Balin Spector or Tyrell Dodson, how important is it having the mass that they have at the defensive tackle position? Daquan Jones, Jordan Phillips, and it sounds like Puna Ford as well. So how much does that help kind of cover up when maybe you don't have a middle linebacker that goes 240?
Yeah, I mean, that's the goal, obviously, with someone like Dorian Williams. As I said, he is a kind of a run and hit kind of player, scrape and flow. You want him to be relatively clean. It doesn't happen on every play, but that becomes absolutely critical, and you try to structure your fronts. They've been predominantly an over front, meaning that the 3 technique is shifted to the strong side of the offensive formation. I don't know if that'll change. Obviously, Leslie Frazier is not there this year, so there could be some changes, probably not drastic. It's been a good defense, but there could be some changes. But the point you made, Brownie, is absolutely right. When you have Milano and Dorian Williams, if it's Dorian Williams, who I think plays much bigger than Bernard. Bernard plays smaller to me. Williams plays bigger.
When we move down the list, Justin Shorter, the wide receiver who's got some really good measurables, big, tall, can run fast, not real explosive out of the blocks, but catches the ball well and wins some 50-50 balls. What are your thoughts about Justin Shorter?
Yeah, Justin Shorter is an interesting guy, Steve, because he started at Penn State and then transferred to Florida. He actually came out of New Jersey as the '1 wide receiver prospect in the country and was a top 20 recruit regardless of position. It hasn't quite worked out, but you're dealing with a guy that's 6'4", 224, tremendous arm length. He can run vertically. He's got accelerating speed. He's another guy that in some ways almost has a tight end build, a slimmer tight end build. But he's got a great body, looks the part, tremendous length, stride length. See, these tall guys have stride length, and even though they might not get off the ball with explosion, once they start accelerating and they build up speed, they eat up a lot of ground. I mean, he caught a 51-yard touchdown versus LSU where he got on top of the corner, and that was a great example of just, the vertical dimension and the stride length. So he'll be interesting. He's a guy that, I think if you looked at him 3 or 4 years ago when he started Penn State, people might have said, hey, this guy will be a first-round pick, and it just never quite worked out for whatever reason. But he's an interesting guy.
When he talked to the media here after getting drafted, Greg, he talked about all of this work that he spent on ball tracking, especially on deep passes. He was doing them with tennis balls. He had guys chucking him tennis balls. He even had his mom throwing them to him. That's how much he was working on it. He's forcing his mom out to the playground or the ball field or whatever to chuck him tennis balls. And he said it made a difference. And, I mean, over the last 2 years, he had 1 drop on 116 targets. What do you think about his deep ball tracking skills?
I think they're not bad. I mean, I think that, that's kind of something he'll have to do. I mean, because he has vertical ability when he could stride off the ball and then get on top of college corners. So we'll see if he can do that in the NFL, but I think that he can do that. And big scoop here, there's probably going to be some deep balls thrown with Josh Allen.
Yeah, no question. And go back and look at the guard and we had Cynthia Freeland on our podcast, and she said she likes it kind of when teams double down on a position to kind of pick a later make-sure pick that you get a guy. And that Nick Broeker for the Bills is a guy they got late in the draft. He's 230th overall. How good can he be, and what's his upside or what's his possibilities?
Yeah, and Nick Broeker is a classic case of a guy, who you draft late. He's a 4-year starter in the SEC. He played guard this year after playing left tackle for 3 years. Quite frankly, the reason he's drafted where he is because his tape was not that good. If his tape was really good coming out of the SEC, he obviously would have been drafted higher. So what you hope is that, your O-line coach, Aaron Cromer, who's been doing this a long time, can turn him into a solid player because there's a lot of deficiencies in his game. And I said, what people have to understand is when a guy gets drafted later, and you guys know this, it's because there are deficiencies in his game. He's got heavy feet. He's not that quick laterally. His change of direction isn't exactly what you want. But when you look at his build and his frame, he's strong, he's sturdy, he plays aggressively, he can generate some power, he's physical, he's tough. When he does come off the ball low with leverage, he can drive block and down block in the run game. He competes in pass protection. He's not a great pass protector, but he competes hard. And, when you play inside, it's not a beauty contest. Often it's more about just competing.
And we also heard that, the reason he might project inside is his arms aren't particularly long either.
No, they're short.
Yeah. So that would kind of make sense there, and that's kind of what Brandon Beane said. He said he'll start at guard, and then, if they have instances where they need somebody to take a few snaps out of tackle, they may kick him out there just to get a few reps here and there. The other interesting thing that he said about Broeker is he has taken snaps in his career. He hasn't done it in a game, but he knows that he has done it before. So that was some interesting intel on Broeker as well. The last guy of the group, Mr. Austin from Oregon State, the corner. He fits the bill from a measurable standpoint, Greg. They love their long corners up here, and he is long.
Yeah, he's one of those guys, Brownie. I don't understand why he's a 7th-round pick. He's 6'1". Okay, now he ran the 4.45, which might turn some people off, but he doesn't play like that. He plays faster. Now, I'm not suggesting he should have been, in the top 90 picks, but I watched this guy and I kept thinking to myself, what's the difference between this guy and a guy taken in the 4th round? I mean, this guy has size, he's got length, he's got good movement. Now he's not sudden and twitchy. The great corner prospects tend to be more like that, but he played mirror match press man really well. I thought he played zone really, really well, which, Brownie, you and I have talked over these last couple of years. Yeah. Not a lot of college corners come into the NFL really understanding zone. I thought he had great awareness of routes, played with really excellent eye discipline. I thought in off coverage, he showed plant and drive burst on routes in front of him really, really well. Now, sure, does he have some flaws? Of course he does. But I just kept watching this guy, and I just kept watching some games because I'm thinking to myself, okay, what's the problem here? What am I missing? And I don't know. I didn't think I was missing a lot. Now, I'm not suggesting he's going to start at outside corner this year, but I think down the road, this guy has starter traits in the NFL.
Yeah, certainly that's the one thing that grabs you when you look at him. He's 6'1", 190, and he looks the part. And you look at the Bills' corner room, all those guys fit that description. So that's probably where it started for Brandon Beane. But then, like you said, it's hard to find warts on his film.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to sit here and read you all my, my 5 or 6 things that I thought were potentially concerns, because every player has something coming into the league. But I thought he was actually a pretty good prospect. But you know how it is with corners now. You go to the combine and all these corners run 4.4 or less, and he's a 4.5 guy. So people might have thought, okay, he just can't run. But he doesn't play like that.
Yeah, right. And the other thing too, Greg, that I find interesting is he's well-versed in a number of defensive coverages. And there was another guy that the Bills took in the 6th round last year that had a well-rounded game in terms of being exposed to a lot of different coverages, and that was Christian Benford, who they took in the 6th round. The guy wound up starting week 1. Now, I'm not saying that's going to happen with Austin, but it seems like the Bills have found the type of DB that they look for late in the draft, someone with a well-rounded body of work in multiple coverages. I'm probably stating the obvious here, but that would seem to help guys assimilate faster, knowing the varied coverages they're going to be asked to play in the league.
Yeah, well, that's why I mentioned that the zone stuff I thought was really good. And as I said, Brown, you and I have discussed there are a lot of corners that come into this league that aren't really good in that area. They don't necessarily do that well. I thought he really had great awareness in zone coverage. And I liked his tape. I mean, like I said, I'm not going to sit here and say, he should have been a top 40 pick or he's going to start from day one. But I can see this guy being a starter down the road with coaching and development.
All right, so the draft is over, and now we've wrapped up the Bills draft class. What film are you going to be able to watch now that gives you any kind of sufficient, fix for your film junkiness?
Well, Steve, I'm a little nuts. So you guys know that. I probably didn't need to say that.
That's right.
Yeah. What I tend to do in the summer is I tend to take some NFL teams that I find really interesting, either on offense or defense, and watch 5 or 6 games in a row, which is something I can't do during the season, because you see it totally differently when you watch, 5 or 6 games in a row as opposed to watching it every week mixed in with everything else. So I'll do that with some teams. And then I also, believe it or not, will start watching some college guys who'll be in next year's draft. Like I'll start to watch Caleb Williams, the quarterback from USC. I'll watch Marvin Harrison. I'll watch Brock Bowers. I'll watch guys who are obviously going to be in next year's draft.
Yeah.
Good stuff.
What do you think is the biggest thing you pull out of watching the same team in consecutive games? Just the way in which the play calling and the scheming morphs and changes based on the opponent? What do you pull from that the most?
Yeah. What I can see, Brownie, more so than when I watch it just during the season, is concepts, schemes, and situations. That's what it's tough to do for me during the season. So, like, for instance, if I look at a stat and see a team like Buffalo, for instance, they're really good on third down. Obviously, every team has concepts. So if I just looked at, let's say, 100 third and 6+ plays, I would see concepts. Here's what they like to do on third down from this part of the field. That's hard for me to do during the season, to find focus like that. So I really like to do those kinds of things in the offseason.
Fair enough, Greg.
Good
Thanks
stuff.
as always for the time. Appreciate all your help during the pre-draft run-up and post-draft here. We'll catch up with you soon. Enjoy your summer, man.
All right, you too, guys. Thanks for having me. Really appreciate it.